Thank you for joining us tonight on day 2 of Joy Fest. I'm Mike Sly, Elder and Chair for Social Justice at St. Andrews. Please join me in an opening prayer. Lord, thank you for bringing us together this evening. We ask that you give us guidance, strength, courage, and humility as we work to find ways to follow your commands, to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and comfort the afflicted. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. St. Andrews Social Justice Committee's contribution to Joy Fest is to host a return visit from Lesley Franciscy, Director of Programs at North Raleigh Ministry. And I think everybody on the call heard her before. Lesley holds a master's degree in social work from North Carolina State. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She has over 15 years of experience in case management, family therapy, supervision, and program development. North Raleigh Ministries plays a key role in St. Andrews' Mt25 initiative. This is one of the 3 local programs we are focused on to poverty in our community. The other 2, in case you're wondering, are Refugee Hope Partners, a program we learned about at lunch after church yesterday, and Loaves and Fishes. So let's see, if you all aren't talking, if you'd mute, that'd be useful. Let me correct. Okay, we'll deal with it later. Speaking of loaves and fishes, Joe Burmester will be our speaker at next week's Matthew 25 Monday program, so please join us then if you can. When Lesley spoke to us last July, she told us about problems that arise for people who do not have enough income to cover basic living costs. Tonight, we've asked her to talk about solutions, particularly North Raleigh Ministries solutions or programs that help people break out of the trap of poverty and improve their lives. Please join me in welcoming Lesley Franciscy. Over to you, Lesley.
All right. Well, thank you for having me back. I was pretty excited about it. I told everyone at the office, I was like, I'm going back there again. So that just means, you know, maybe it was good the first time. I wanted to start though tonight, just maybe a show of hands. Who was on the last time that we were talking? Okay. And then I kind of want to just jump right into what North Raleigh Ministries, who we are, just a little bit of background. And then we really are going to talk about solutions. So not just at North Raleigh Ministries, how we're tackling some of the social problems right now in the community, but also how you all can get involved in that, you know, either with us or in different ways. And so I'm going to share my screen and we'll see if I can see you all and my presentation. It's not.
Yep, we've got it.
All right. Okay, the hard part's over. All right. So just a little bit of background for those of you who don't know us. So we're right up the street from you. And we were founded in 2004. And so as an extension of a group of North Hills churches in the area who established us as a nonprofit to meet those basic needs of people that they saw coming in need of financial assistance and food assistance. So it's really just started with those 2 things in mind. And it really was just about the basic needs of the individuals coming in. So how can we right now here today get this problem solved for them, right? Food on the table, a utility bill paid, past due rent paid. And they established our thrift shop, our Harvest Plaza thrift shop, a little while later as a funding arm of the ministry. Sometimes people think of us and they think that maybe we do something with clothing, like a clothing closet, but that's in fact how we, you know, earn our funds to do the work that we do. And it was primarily volunteer run. So the majority of people in thrift, but also in the crisis center were volunteers. And so just kind of something to think about that. I always, when I think back to 2004, because I was working in the field of social work in this area at that time, it's just a really, really different landscape. So when people were coming in need, they were needing like a couple $100s, right? Like it was very, it was a small amount of money. It was something that you could kind of like easily kind of assess and pay for. And there were a lot of different agencies doing like kind of similar work. And so they would sort of be able to go to North Valley Ministries and maybe First Presbyterian Church downtown and kind of scoop together this past due amount that they were needing. And it was something that was really interesting to me. I did a lot of work in child welfare. And so I worked with a lot of families that were accessing a lot of these different types of services. And so what they kind of started to see were the same people returning again and again, like when they would become re-eligible. And so when I joined North Valley Ministries, that's something that I really dug into pretty quickly. And I'm going to get to that. So now today we have an expanded list of supporting and partner churches and also businesses and agencies. And we're much more focused on the underlying root cause of the crisis that the family is in. And so I think in the past, it was very much, I feel like people had to come in, they had to tell a really like a story that was, had to be a story that was touching. They had to have a story. They had to have a reason that they were in this situation, and people would come up with really creative reasons. And I know this because we have our database, and I was able to go back lots of years to the beginning and kind of see the documentation that we collected and what people were talking about, like what was this crisis that happened. And so we know now that it's not a one-time crisis that puts people into the situations that they're in. It's over time, it's a series of challenges. And a lot of times it's something that people cycle through kind of again and again. And so we look at this just a lot differently now. So today we still have the food pantry. We do not do direct financial payments, so meaning like rental payments or utility payments. Instead, we have social workers who actually sit down with the family and come up with a plan that's sustainable for them. And I'm going to get into more about how does that actually look? What does that look like? We now have 2 thrift shops. So we have another one over off of Brentwood. It's the old where Carolina Thrift used to be. As well as our Harvest Plaza thrift shop. And we use evidence-informed practices in our work with our clients. So like I myself am a licensed clinical social worker. We have other licensed workers. We have other bachelor's level social workers. And we still use our volunteers in the crisis center to actually work in the food pantry, go out and engage with clients, try to get them engaged in further programming, and then definitely in our thrift shops. So I wanted to kind of jump into who are we serving? So I know that you all, you're going to church in this community. You might live right here in this community. I do as well. I live just a couple miles up the road from St. Andrews, and you get an idea of what's going on in the community by going out in the community and sort of seeing what's happening. Our clients live in the following zip codes that I put up on the PowerPoint. And that's because simply that's where our church partners exist and who supports and funds us. And that's something that we're hoping to do is expand a couple additional zip codes. And that's based on an increase in people coming from bordering zip codes and kind of some gaps in services around those areas. So that's something that will be coming. The majority of the clients that we serve, they are presently housed. And so that's one big thing that I want to differentiate. So I know a lot of you are seeing the increase in people, on the side of the road, like needing money, homelessness, like that is something that has arrived in Raleigh. And I can talk a little bit more about that. But it's something that we will meet with individuals who are experiencing homelessness. We'll put together emergency like crisis food.
I'm dialed in.
I'm sorry, I can't. Is that a question or is someone's mic just?
That was just noise.
So we will do, we'll invite them inside, sit down with the social worker and connect them to services that are in the community that are designed for homeless families. But we work with people who are presently housed. So that's something that's really important to differentiate. So I wouldn't not send someone to us who is experiencing homelessness, but I wouldn't have them go out of their way to us when there are better places to send people who are, that's what they do. That's all they do. And so that's a really big thing to think about. With the individuals we serve there, the majority are 3 months away from losing housing. So that's something that's really important to know. And what we know about that system. So once you are not housed, we right now have a 5 to 6 week wait for family shelter in Raleigh. So it's not like there is even a safety net like there used to be, that worst case scenario, I get evicted from my home, I'm going to go to the with my family. That doesn't exist any longer. And so we are at capacity. And so our whole entire role is to keep people from becoming in that place. So, and then when you think about who we're serving, so the majority of clients, their income is through employment. And by majority, it's about, I would say 65% of families. So you have either one person working, multiple people working in the household, and they are just not earning enough to kind of make it to the end of the month. So you see a lot of low wage jobs. You see a lot of people working multiple part-times that just don't add up to a full-time because it doesn't have benefits. It doesn't have things like sick leave and paid time off and things like that. Also, when you think about who are the other people, so we have people who are on fixed income, so Social Security, disability. And then we also have individuals who kind of go through cycles of being employed in like really good, stable fields and jobs, and then periods of unemployment. And so you kind of get to see just that cycle and what is happening there. A lot of times that has to do with mental health or physical health types of challenges. And so those are really those categories of people that we see, like the bulk of it. There's always some exceptions and things like that, but that's who we're serving. And also, a big main theme is just the lack of supports. So I don't just mean like, you know, friends and family that live in the area. I even mean just someone that you could call and talk to if you were struggling or feeling really disconnected. And so that kind of includes like family, friends, lack of church support, and then lack of professional supports. And so not having like a primary care physician, not having, you know, maybe a counselor or therapist, and really needing that, maybe being someone who is struggling with substance use or mental health challenges and just isn't linked to those appropriate resources. Part of that has to do with the population we serve just really not qualifying for assistance in those areas. So they're not receiving Medicaid or other types of insurance that would help them. And then them not being offered those types of things through employment, not being able to afford those out of pocket. So you're talking again about this gap population, which is a growing population in our area and specifically in North Raleigh. So any questions though, before I move on, just about who are the individuals who come in to see us, or why? Just want to make sure we're all like kind of on the same page. So, we.
Black speaker button. Yeah, I did.
Lesley, one sort of clarifying thing. I believe last time I looked, the number of people who are actually homeless is only about 2,000.
Doesn't mean it's not there.
Right.
Take a life away.
Let me mute whoever that is. Okay.
Yeah, it's it was interesting. I was at Triangle Family Services for a community meeting the other week, and they were talking about getting ready to do like their big count of the homeless population. And so, yeah, you're right on track with that. I think there are a lot of people, there's a definition of homelessness, then we don't all share the same one. They would count anyone who is like has to sleep outside or in a shelter because they don't have an alternative. And if you think about the way that like the school system counts homelessness, right? That would be if you're like sleeping on someone's couch, like you maybe can stay there for a month or 2 or 3. They've already said that you can do that, but that would be considered homeless. And so the number you're talking about, is that like true? Like I do not have a choice, I'm on the street type of homelessness. We do serve individuals who are staying with like friends or family, so like they're housed but not in their own housing. So that is something that's is a really important distinction. So and that we'll get into that. It gets a little bit complicated just because they have to be staying there with a friend or family to the degree that that friend or family is willing to come in with them that first time and get them established and set up with us, if that makes sense. So that we aren't serving people who maybe are just staying like on this couch for one night and then they're in Southeast Raleigh for one night. And then there's got to be like a bit of consistency for us to be able to engage and even work with them. So with our programs, I really like to tell just kind of like this part of the evolution. So in 2018, we really wanted to look at a deeper dive into who we were serving. So we knew a little bit about them. And so we wanted to look at, the records go all the way back into our old database. You can't actually pull reports. So we had a lot of interns who kind of had to really dig in there with like spreadsheets and pull out this raw data. And what we really found were those individuals who came in for financial assistance were returning within a year for more financial assistance. And so this was like a big part of what our churches supported us with in the past, were dollars for those bills, right? And so that was not a good sign at all. It was kind of like right when they were sort of like re-eligible, they were back again. And that was pretty common across the different agencies that were doing this type of work. And it's not uncommon at all. And so if you're low income and there's this opportunity to get assistance every so often, like that's just a way that you're gonna get your family's needs met. That's sort of like a piece of this is here, I'm eligible for it, I'm going to utilize it, right? Like that is just sort of kind of what happens. And so the other piece of that were we could look and see the people who'd received financial assistance over time. So all the way back to when we were first founded. Those are the people who we are still seeing coming to the food pantry every month, like regularly. And so you can kind of think about, like a couple of our volunteers from the food pantry who are on today, you can kind of like, you'll get to know certain clients because they're here like all the time. It's like, and so it's nice because you form a relationship. It's not nice because you're like, oh my goodness, they are just stuck here. Right. And so we talk about that a lot because when you look at that reliance on a non-natural support like us, anything past 24 months, we would consider that dependency. Like they are dependent upon this resource. And then you have to look at your role in creating that. So if NRM were to go out of business tomorrow, what would happen to this person who is reliant upon this resource for food each month, right? And so you kind of get into the ethics of that type of situation. And so when we look at best practice in social work, you're looking at empowering people, you're looking at helping them figure out how to get their needs met in a way that they're going to feel like, wow, like I have a piece in this, like I did this, like I'm capable. This is the kind of thing that we're looking for. And so we also did a client survey, and at the time in 2018, and we got 100% of our food pantry clients over the course of 2 months were able to answer what more would they like to see out of North Valley Ministries, what type of supports. And so all of that had to do with financial education and emotional support. So like a lot of emotional support is kind of where that was. And so it's kind of easy to look at this and be like, oh, financial education, we'll do budgeting with everyone. And that sounds so simple and easy, right? And I'm going to get into why those traditional, like just education pieces don't work. They're not very effective. So we'll kind of move on. So 2018, we kind of started, what we tried to do was we held on to doing direct financial assistance for a little while because our partners were like, no, like this is an important thing to us, right? And it's something that we kind of redeveloped, we relooked at it, and we sat down with individuals and like really dug into what was going on. And so we actually have a volunteer on this meeting right now who was part of piloting that out with me. It was very fun time. But what we really learned was like, you first want to see if people are able to sustain like after they receive that assistance, right? And so if someone their rent is past due, they owe $1,200, but they got a job 3 weeks ago and they get their first paycheck next week and they're going to be making enough money to move forward, that makes sense to help somebody with this gap payment. If you have someone who is 3 months behind on rent and they have no income coming in, you can pay that rent for that month, but that is a person who is going to lose their housing eventually, right? Like you would either need to have lots of months of rent for them to be able to pay their rent, to give them time for something else to come through, which you would hope that maybe that's something they're working on, that they have the ability and they have the motivation to do that. But a lot of the times that those are kind of the individuals that are just like kind of going from place to place, getting, some amount of money to sort of struggle through. You wait until you get to a place where the landlord's not willing to work with you anymore. You get evicted, you start the process over by looking for help with deposit. So it's kind of like this cycle. And so we got pretty good at identifying the people who were in a crisis and it looked like they would be able to sustain moving forward. But it still was not effective at the end of the day. The number of people we helped less people with more money. And what we were realizing is just all of those root causes, like they were just not being dug into. So when you look at employment instability and mental health, and like you can kind of get somebody stable for just a little bit, but without looking at that history and the ways that things had kind of fallen apart for them in the past, there's just sort of the same things kind of happen again and again in a cycle. And so it really took COVID to change our programs, and that had a lot to do with just necessity. So what happened with the housing, the eviction moratorium, it's really easy to kind of see it now looking backward. And I remember the day that we learned like no one's going to be evicted. Everyone's going to be okay. People who couldn't go to work, they didn't have to worry about the evictions happening. And I remember thinking like, if they're going to wipe out rent somehow, like, no evictions for 6 months, don't worry about your rent for 6 months, start over in 6 months. I'm like, that would work. But if this means no one needs to pay for 6 months, and then suddenly all of the money is due at the same time, this is going to be an absolute disaster. And so our executive director, Donna, and we had talks about this in 2020, and it's just, it's happening now. So the eviction moratorium has ended. For the very first time, people were coming to us owing, 12 months of back rent. And that was just something that none of the agencies could accommodate or help with. And so you think about churches that we kind of used to partner with, First Presbyterian, different places, could kind of pool your funds together and come up with $1,200 for someone. This was, more like $12,000. And so we just started to see like, this is not something that's possible to maintain. And then you're also looking at the fact that the families couldn't sustain going forward, even if those amounts were paid for them. And so that's what we really decided, like the stuff that we're doing with our journey program, the stuff that we were able to roll out even amidst the pandemic that we were starting to get results for, we shifted and put our energies and efforts into that. And I am so glad we did, because we're just in a really different place than some other agencies who kind of stuck with the you know, the way that it had always been. And so we have always will have our food pantry, and they go into our food assistance programs. Our guidance and prayer program is it's something that we just have gotten so many more calls than ever before about. So this is anyone who comes into the food pantry, anyone who calls in and is just, I'm not sure where to go, I don't know what to do, I'm at risk of losing my housing, they can come in, sit down with a social worker, and we spend a lot of time. So if you think about a 1 hour session where you're not saying, well, how much do you owe? Where can you get this money? What does this look like? Instead, you're talking about, wow, like you didn't want to be in this place that you're in right now. Tell me about the last time things were going really well for you, right? Where were you living? What did that look like? Who was around you supporting you? You're just really getting to know them in a much different way. And that's something that we've had to really do well, because people, they're going to say, I'm looking for $13,000 for this rent. And we say, we do not have that. And they're like, okay, bye. So how do you engage people who are really focused on wanting one thing when we know there's so much more that we can offer them? So that's what that program is. Transitions is a program for first-time food pantry clients. So on their very first visit to the food pantry, we want to engage them really early to prevent them from getting more behind than they already are. And then our journey program, we have been doing this for a couple of years now, and that's a really in-depth 12-week program for families that we've gotten some really good results on. So I'm going to share what those look like. So kind of to start with the food pantry. So emergency food is anyone who shows up is going to leave with food. So if they're not in our service area, if they are homeless, they're going to get food, and they're also going to have that opportunity to meet with somebody. Our food pantry is offered once a month to individuals who are needing additional help with food. So that is produce, meat, dry goods. Tailored grocery assistance is for families who are engaged in programs. And that's something that they're able to access each week, and they really choose exactly what it is that they're needing for their household. Healthy Kids, it's kid-friendly food. We offer that in addition to the food pantry. So for any child who is school age, so kindergarten through 12th grade, it's just additional bags of food that are easy to prepare for kids. If you kind of think about Backpack Buddies, it's something that everybody kind of knows and has heard of. Backpack Buddies is really good if you are a low income family who receives food stamps. You're going to qualify for that. Something that the social worker or counselor at the school will identify the child. They'll have the parent agree to an application, fill it out, and then it's something that they get each week to take home from school. But what it doesn't do really well is help kids who are in an immediate crisis. So like if this week everything is just falling apart for me, lost the job, we're behind on the bills, and now we really don't have money for food, it's a process to get Backpack Buddies. Healthy Kids is just walking in and saying that you need food for your child. So there's not like an application process or like a waiting period. Another thing about that is holidays, summers, track outs, like it doesn't matter. We're able to provide the food. And then our produce stand is every Thursday. That's bread, fruits and veggies, and people are able just to walk up and walk away with that, just supplement their diet with more fresh foods. So right now we're at about 210 households a month, and we're averaging 40 new families a month. This is more I keep saying we're going to surpass the numbers in 2020, those very few months of COVID. And in October, it's like we were just right there. November, it's absolutely going to happen. it has to do with the cost of living. That's what's happening right now. It's our population just has completely gotten hit the hardest with that because they were already just barely getting by, and this has just pushed them over the edge. And so the 40 new families a month is also really unique. That is where that transitions program came from, was a dedicated social worker to engage the new families that are coming in. So they have really different and unique needs. And then every single family who calls in or comes in is offered to come in and sit down and like really look at like, how can we help them in a continued way? Like, what are the things that they need? That can be from us, that can be, you know, from other agencies that are out there as well. So guidance and prayer, I talked a little bit about it. I don't know that I do the best job of explaining like what these calls are like, or when people ask to speak with a social worker and do come in, what that looks like. But I personally have done 4 safety or suicide assessments in the past couple months through the course of these calls. So I don't want to make light of like the challenges that people are facing right now in the community. And this is our very own community. We're talking about North Raleigh right here surrounding us. It's financial, the level of financial insecurity and hopelessness, right? They just kind of like go together. And I think a lot of people, it's also something there's a lot of shame around and guilt around. So it's kind of like something that a lot of people are suffering through quietly and not wanting to share. And then you kind of couple like the mental health, so maybe depression, anxiety, physical health problems, and not being able to get help for those things. And you really have some just really scary situations, people that are just like, it would be better if I weren't here. That's really kind of some of what we're seeing. And so when we're meeting with people, we're really, the number one thing is safety. So are they okay? Do they have a place that they can go? Who are their supports? Like, we're really looking to hear, like, who do they have in their life? Who are they able to talk to? And that's one of the very first things that we do, is try to bring more people into the situation with them. So of course that's going to be us, but a lot of times that's also like a church, you know, a trusted person at church. It's also, you know, it could be a pastor, it could be, you know, maybe they're an older adult and it's their adult children that don't know that they're going through these things. And so we're talking through that with them. Also, if it is like a crisis situation, with mental health, we're calling and making sure that they're getting assessed, they're safe, and all of those things. And then we can continue on with our work with them. But oftentimes, if you're not insured, it really takes that level of a crisis to be able to tap into funding that's available for people who don't have insurance, unfortunately. So it's definitely not something that's available in any kind of preventive way with mental health. I might have talked about this last time, but our state is, it's one of we have one of the most difficult states to access mental health care in, and one of the highest suicide rates right now. So I think that we were in the top 10, no, the bottom 10, whichever way you want to look at that, the bad 10 when it comes to mental health. So 60 individuals a month, that is a huge percent of the people that are coming into the food pantry. And this is something that if, you know, I meet with our social workers every week, and we go through every client that they're working with just to make sure that everything is safe, and like the services they're putting in place are what's needed, and just giving the support to the social workers so that they know their case plan and what they're doing. And I can't miss a week with our social workers, because it's like, if I did, it would just be this big long list piled up of, you know, I have this person and I'm not sure, you know, if this is something that I need to, is this like an emergent need, or is this something that I can work through with them? It's just always kind of like juggling those things and making sure that people are safe and cared for. So the underlying goal, so lots of times people come in and it's about, I just need funds for my rent. I just need some help with food, and then everything else is fine. When you kind of dig in, you see these other things like inconsistent employment. Life skills is a really big one. And it's also something that you really don't have adults come in and say, like, I really need some help with life skills. Like, I am not really good at communicating. I kind of don't call people back. I sometimes, I'm not very pleasant at work, and I can't keep a job. It's usually life skills areas or things that people don't see in themselves, but that others see in them. And so it's a really challenging one. It has to be have a really good relationship to start to work on some of that stuff. When you're talking about adults, you can do that kind of work really easily with children or teenagers. And then of course we talked about these, but mental health, physical health, a lot more substance use, but substance use that people don't really see as problematic. So when we're talking about, alcohol or substance use, and it's like, well, yeah, I have, some drinks when I'm hanging out with friends or after work. And like, once you get to know them a little more, you'll kind of hear like how it actually is more than it sounds, and how it's getting in the way of a lot of things. And then you start to be able to kind of open up the door to like, what would this look like if we were to talk about this and change this and get you more support around this? So that's one that's very common. And then relationships, lots of unhealthy relationships, not always unsafe, but unhealthy relationship dynamics. We've had a couple of times, a mom will come in, she's caring for her kids. She's, she'll say she's married, her husband works a lot, and you kind of get more and more into it, and you learn he's actually has a whole another family that he's been staying with and supporting. And like, you kind of get into these things that it's like, there's just so much shame and guilt, and just really interesting things that you wouldn't know about unless you created that relationship with someone where they felt like they could talk to you about that. And then just being connected to their community in any kind of a way. Isolation has been a really, really big piece of what's going on with individuals' mental health. And it's one of those things where once you become isolated, it's really, really, really hard to start to get back out. Like I can't even tell you, I think we've had in our journey class, because there's a class and there's also the one-on-one sessions, but the class has been a lot of older individuals first time kind of like back out into the community. And there's so much anxiety around coming into that space, and not just for fear of COVID, but just socializing again and socializing with strangers. And it's a really interesting dynamic. I know if we worked individually with kids, we would see a lot of that, but we see it primarily with adults that typically like live alone and are just having a lot of challenges just getting back out there. Any questions at all about guidance and prayer? So this, like I said, people can email us, call us, walk in, make an appointment, but these are just people right here in our neighborhoods who you would just be like surprised at who comes in, people with master's degrees, people who are teachers, people who you might see in your day-to-day life if you knew, but it's really interesting. And a lot of people just not knowing where to go. I'm hopeless. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to talk to. It's just this like very isolating feeling. So I put our model of care in here because I think sometimes it helps to talk about this. So person-centered, financial empowerment focused, and evidence informed. This crosses the board with all of our programs. So person-centered means if someone said, how do you engage the people that you engage? It looks different every single time. So if you think about where people are in the stages of change, everyone comes into us to see us in a pre-contemplative state of change. So they don't see where they fit into the problem. They only see like, I need some help with food. I need some help with rent. And so your first step is just literally to engage them in some kind of a way. And so usually this might look like someone calling and they're saying, I need rent. And then I'm saying, we don't offer direct rental assistance, but we would love to support you and hear more about what's going on and just walk you through some of this, because I know it's really hard out there right now in the community to find resources. And they'll say, okay, well, I don't really think I need that. I really just need to keep calling places for rent. And then we'll say, well, how is that going for you? And they're like, well, not good. Like, you're the only people who called me back. We get that all the time, by the way. You're the only people who call me back. And so it's like, well, what other leads do you have? Like, who are you going to be calling and what's that going to look like? And then you kind of get into like, okay, well, wow, they're really going to be losing their housing in 2 weeks. They really don't have any leads. No one's calling them back. I talked to a young lady the other day where this was kind of the thing. She wanted to get off the phone with me the second I said, we don't have, direct financial assistance. And so I heard her little baby in the background. I was like, oh, is that your baby? She was like, yeah. She's like, I was living with my mom up until, she said, about 6 months ago. And I have this baby and my mom was just doing everything. And I didn't even feel like I was the parent. I felt like I was a kid in her house again. And she was the mom of this baby. And I just really needed to get out. And so I found an agency to help me with deposit. She was working, doing like DoorDash or something like that at the time. And so she had some money and this agency helped and they got her into this apartment. And then she realized she couldn't work even if she had childcare, she couldn't earn enough to pay for the apartment. And she didn't have childcare. And so then she was relying on like a neighbor to watch the baby and she was trying to go out and drive. And I'm like, that sounds really, really stressful. I was like, is this like, what did you think that you were going to be doing at this stage of your life? Like, go back to when you were little, like what, you're 23, you said you're 23. Like, what did you want to be doing? She's like, well, I thought I would be done with school. I thought that I was gonna, so we're talking about that and how she met this guy, she got pregnant, she had the baby. But she really wants to be back at school. And I was like, well, Wake Tech has these amazing programs, like you can actually for free right now. Like, and so we talked a little bit about that. And I'm like, she's like, I want to do that. I'm like, well, how do you think you could do it? Like, how could you do this with the baby and the childcare? Like, we're just like, kind of just like brainstorming. Right. And so through the course of the conversation, because in the beginning, she was like, I have nowhere to go. I need the rent. And that's was her focus. And so by the end of the conversation, she was saying, it might not be so bad if I move back in with my mom, because she would definitely let me come back. I know she'd help with childcare and maybe I could do one of these programs. Right. So that was a 20-minute conversation. When you think of person-centered, you're thinking about, I'm engaging this person, I'm truly listening and hearing them. And I'm also like starting to shift something within them, right? Like you have to get them out of that like tunnel, like focus on that thing that they need and like open up, like you've just got to get it to open up a little bit. And so she actually decided to come in. She was a new client, so she was able to do our transitions program, work with Rashida, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. The financial empowerment focus, this is the opposite of giving someone money for their rent when it's past due. So I would say that the work that Rashida is doing with her, because she's going to go on and do Journey after this, is realizing one, like, I can't maintain this. That is empowering to know, like, this isn't going to work, right? Like you're not going to stay stuck on this hamster wheel of all you're trying to do is come up with this rent that's not working out. And then where do you want to be instead? So, and why, right? So her goal was, I want a different life for my baby. I want an education because I want my child to see that I have this and I did this despite my circumstances. And I want to have a house one day, right? Like, and so that's where, our classes come into play, but it's not like we're sitting down, we're like, hey, well, let's just, you need to earn this much more money and this is your budget. It's like, forget that. It's the behavior change comes from like really, truly wanting something, knowing where you're going, having the hope that you can get there and the support you can get there. And so we do a lot of budgeting work, but I think that if we didn't do the budgeting work, we would still get to where we needed to be with families. It's kind of like a tiny percentage of the financial work that we do with them. You talk about culture and finances, that has to do, with even just family culture and finances, lots of different things. And then it's evidence informed. So that means we use brief solution focused therapy and we use motivational interviewing. So motivational interviewing is that they're starting at a place of not even seeing themselves as a part of the problem. And then you're moving into, I see where I fit into this, and the motivation to actually start to take some steps and do some things differently. So our case managers meet with families primarily like in the late, like in the evenings. They meet with them sometimes before clients go into work. It's very tailored to when families can meet. So that's something that's really important to know too, to be able to actually engage with this population. Any questions at all about this model of care? It's woven through our transitions and journey programs. So this is the transitions program. So the young lady that I was speaking about, she was new to us. So she didn't come into the pantry. She called up and was wanting that financial assistance, and then ended up working with Rashida in this program. And so if you can imagine, so those goals that they were setting for her, sometimes you might have to leave that goal on there that is, I'm going to maintain this apartment, because that's what the client wants to do. And in that case, you might have like, that's plan A, but you get them to come up with like the plan B. So we need also a plan B in case this doesn't work out for you, right? And sometimes people are more willing and open to hear that than like, well, that's not going to work. Like we need to do something else, right? Or you stay focused on exactly what they want, which is that plan A, staying in the apartment, knowing that's not an option, and you're gonna it's gonna crash and burn together, right? You've got to be more ahead. And we think about people in crisis like that, they are seeing things through a fog, and you need to slowly, like it's like taking steps forward, and the fog clears a little more, a little more, a little more. And you as the case manager, you're just a few steps ahead of them. So you have to be a little bit ahead. And this is for 6 to 8 weeks that they are able to work together. She gets the tailored grocery assistance when she comes in for her one-on-one sessions. And then really is just working toward that education goal. So the simultaneous goals of either keeping the apartment, kind of like something coming through with rent for this month, which started that way. And then it was like, well, what about the next month, right? And what about this childcare? And how are you going to reach that education goal if you're just struggling just to get this basic rent paid, right? Like that was the evolution of the work with this client. And again, she's losing her housing. That was not her goal. It's 100% a step backward to then go forward, right? And the work is getting people to see a different plan than the one that they are just so holding on tightly to sometimes. And so at the end of this program, clients have the ability to just be done. They're like, I'm in a much better place. Stuff is stabilized. She's able to move home, the childcare, get enrolled in school, all those things coming into play for her. Also a big piece of it was healthy relationships. So they were talking about this history of relationships that this young woman had and why those choices are being made. So you're really digging into some deep work there. And so at the end, they can also decide to go on and move into our journey program, which is a like much deeper dive. But a lot of times, like this situation with this young lady, it has a pretty is what I would call like a pretty easy case, because she had a support system and she had the ability to move right into another safe, stable place. It was not her preferred place to be, but it was safe and stable. And so I would call this like a really easy case. But this started as a phone call to us where she was ready just to hang up on me. It really was a like, wait, is that your baby I hear? You know, it's like, it's a very much like you have to do that really heavy lifting in the beginning to get to know people. And so transitions outcomes. So we started this program in October of last year. So this is only 12 months, 13 months old. We knew that we were starting to see a trend in so many new families coming in, and we knew what was going on with the economy, and we were like, we need to get out in front of this. So Journey is offered 3 times a year. This is offered that very first time someone comes in. We say, come in, you can sit down with the social worker. So we don't want to miss anybody. We want them to get connected really quickly. So at the end of Journey or transitions, 100% have a plan to meet their financial needs, meaning whatever that looks like, this girl now has a plan because she is leaving that situation that was not affordable for her. Sometimes this looks like people getting a roommate. Sometimes it looks like them taking on another job, but whatever that looks like, they now have a solid plan that's in place where they can meet their own financial needs of the place that they decide to stay in or leave. And then of their other goals. So for her, we talked about education and we talked about childcare. We talked about relationships. So her critical goals, she's enrolled in school, right? That is one of the goals. You could say the childcare goal has been accomplished simply by the fact that she moved in. This is like a really simple one. So there's ones that are just so much more challenging. We do a resilience scale. It's pre and post. So when people first come in and join a program and at the end, and it asks questions about how they see themselves. Like, I feel confident that I can tackle challenges that come my way in the future, right? Like it talks about just how you see yourself and your ability to bounce back. And all of our clients showed improvement in resilience pre and post transitions. I think that's my favorite goal of all. I mean, it is my favorite goal of all. If you can change the way that people see themselves, that's just amazing. Everyone said they would recommend it. And then we haven't had much time to do follow-ups, right? So we started last October. So the first graduates were really finishing up in like December, because the program's a couple months. But we've had about 26 families go through this program now, and 67% of them have not returned to the pantry 3 months after they finish the program. So I'm excited to get more length and time on this so we can see how far we can kind of go out with this. But these are really, really good preliminary results for a program that just got going. We knew it would be successful because it's based on Journey. It's kind of like Journey light, right? Like we're gonna get in there really fast. You can do that. The earlier prevention, the earlier you get in, the less effort is going to take, the less resources it's going to take. That's just the way that it is. And so this is a very like early intervention type of a model. Okay. So Journey, I think that I talked about last time, but this is now, we have done this for a couple of years. This was entirely based on the client's feedback to us about what they wanted. This encompasses all of those things about support and the financial education. So we offer it 3 times a year. We are graduating 10 families next Wednesday night from this program. So we've been in it for 12 weeks. And so this is 12 weeks long. And in addition to those goals and those sessions weekly and the groceries weekly, they're also going to class. They're doing Financial Peace University Wednesday evenings with the whole group. And so there's a really big group, just cohesion piece that takes place. They support each other. We have dinner and childcare, so everyone like eats dinner together. The kids are there, and it's not financial peace like if anyone has been through it before, like I've been through it before at a church. This is much more support group oriented. So you're doing that education piece, but you're also talking about exactly where they are in their lives. So like we have them talk about I left, you know, my the abusive husband, right? And the group knows about the situation and they're talking about it and they're encouraging it. We have people get a job while they're in it and they're like, oh my gosh, you know, it's like everyone's just so supportive of each other, and people are sharing things that are like really rough in there. So we had a woman who talked about like she had a relapse, she used again, she spent all of this money like over the weekend, came to group and was like just crying about it, and everyone's like, hey, like it's okay, like you can pick up, you can move on. So this is like, I've had people sometimes say like, oh, I would love to come sit in, and I'm like, it's much more of like a therapeutic group that has that financial component to it. So it's just tailored really differently. So we start again in January. This is always something that we can use help around, like specifically the childcare piece of it, and the hospitality part of it. So for our outcomes, these are just amazing to me. So everyone leaves with a plan of how to pay for all the things that they have to pay for. Oftentimes that always has to do with getting rid of things that they don't need. Everyone has saved an emergency fund who has completed the program. So this is coming from people who may not even have a bank account at the beginning of the work. So this is a really, really big deal. And also everyone tells us that they can't do it. They're like, that is not possible. And every single person does it. So again, with critical goals, lots of mental health goals, lots of like physical health goals. We get a lot of people to go and get a physical. I can tell you that, like, huge fear when you haven't been to the doctor or the dentist in a long time about what they're going to find. And when you don't have insurance or a way to pay for that, it's really frightening. And so we're like, if they can do this with us, like, you've got this support, like, let's do this and find out, because it's the not knowing, right? And people who have some really serious health conditions. Again, everyone's showing improvement on that brief resilience scale. Everyone recommend it. And then 80% had no food pantry visits after 3 months. And then of our clients that responded to their 3-month follow-up, so this is around like I would say like a 75% response rate. They fill out a survey about how are they doing. They have maintained that emergency fund and continued to save and work on like their debt snowball and those baby steps. So we have them say, which baby step are they on? How much have they been able to save? And so we also meet for support groups. So for Journey, this is something that's ongoing. So every 3 months, all the graduates get back together again. So it's kind of this growing group over time. And they talked about just what's going well, what is not going well, encourage each other. And so we have this support group is Wednesday night, but it's also my birthday. And I literally, I was like, I want to go so bad, because it's like, you need it. It's like the best night of the quarter because everyone is just doing so amazing, right? So you kind of see a lot of programs work really well while the person's engaged. But what is so special about this is just the connections that are made. So when people are leaving Journey, they've repaired relationships with family, they've gotten back into church, they've like just done so much work, they've gotten into support groups, small groups, they've started volunteering, they're back in the workforce, right? And so you just leave them in this place that's like, they don't even miss us, right? Like you that's what you want. You don't want to leave this too big of a I don't know how to just explain it. I think there's just a lot of programs where you get too enmeshed in a person's life to the point that like they're attributing their success to you. Like, you did this for me, I couldn't have done this without you, right? And I think that's something that we do because it's such a nice thing to hear, but it's not a nice thing to do. Like, clients leave Journey saying, I can't believe I did this, right? Like, that's what you want to hear. And so they're owning that success, they're continuing that success. And like, yes, if they see us in the community, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, how are you? Hi. But it's not like, oh, I've missed you, I don't know what I'm doing these days. Yeah. So this is the only time we get to see them again. It's quarterly when they come in and they bring their kids, and it's just an amazing thing. So how do you send someone to us? So again, I want to kind of stress, like, if there's someone who is actively homeless, if they're just right beside us somewhere, definitely refer, but I wouldn't have them come all the way down to us. I would have them call us because we can get them connected to the right place. So that's something that we do a lot of. And if you have a family that's just in a place where they're really struggling financially, they can email our program assistant, they can call us, they can just pull up during our pantry hours and get food and also get connected. But on our website, it has those zip codes. It has exactly what the person would need to bring to their first visit, which is really minimal documentation. So we've basically stripped it down to just like what is required, like just what we have to collect from people, which is proof that they live in our service area. So that can be lots of different types of photo IDs, including the community action ID. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but it's something that is they are trying to get the Spanish speaking, like undocumented population to, like, the police are now recognizing this ID, and so are schools. So it's a community issued photo ID. But anyway, so yeah, an ID, a photo ID that has one of our zip codes on it. And if they are recently here or don't have an updated ID, then it can be a utility bill or a lease or a spectrum bill or something else that shows one of those zip codes on it. So it's pretty simple. And that's just at that very first visit. But I wanted to just ask any questions about the approach that we take. That's a lot of information.
Yeah, whoever has a question, just take yourself off mute and say it.
North Carolina has, I guess, TANF and Work First. Do you work with them, or the people engaged in your program also
Mhm.
programs as well?
Yep. So we have a lot of people who work with NC Works. They, you know, it's the types of assistance, like, they have changed just since I've been in the field, right? Like, just even over the course of 15 years. But when you think about what that looks like, so Work First is like, you're not employed. So our people are employed, they're just not earning enough, right? So, like, yes, lots of people will take advantage of, like, NC Works, like job training programs, different things like that. We have people who sometimes have, like, lots of different types of training degrees under their belt, like different things like that. It's much more complicated. So, like, when I think about, either people are underemployed, and this will have, like, a lot to do with just all the other things that are going on in their life, right? So they just like a really chaotic lifestyle. So they're not qualifying for assistance with childcare. So they're kind of like running from place to place with the kids. Like I said, if they're sick, they're not getting paid. If they're staying home with a child, they're not getting paid while they're out. Just lots of different things like that. And so I think people moving into, like, higher paying jobs is a really important thing. Not everyone is capable of, like, going back to get like a higher, like, an education that's going to offer them that type of a job. Or if it is, you sometimes have lots of underlying issues that make it challenging. So, like, substance use and mental health. And that's kind of where we try to get at. So kind of see people trying all these different things, and it just keeps falling apart because that root cause has never been identified, or they aren't recognizing that whatever's going on in their life is, like, a really big barrier to them being successful. So an example of it would be, we had a woman come in, and she actually was in the field of social work, like, and had done lots of stuff, but she would have just, like, these periods of time where she would do really, really well. And then she'd have these periods of time where she wasn't, working at all. And she had experienced just a lot of trauma as a child. So, like, physical abuse, emotional abuse, like lots of just unhealthy relationships as an adult as well. And so she would go into these, like, deep periods of depression where she would just not be able to go to work. And so she would kind of, like, go through this whole piece where she's, like, out on leave, and then the relationship with her and her employers, like, turning really bad. She eventually, like, leaves or is terminated, and then she really struggles to get another job. And so it starts really good. She feels like it's going to be different this time. It's this really supportive environment. And then the same thing, like, starts to happen. She starts to not show up, and things get bad again. And so it's sort of like, you look at the resume, you're like, oh, wow, you've worked for all these amazing places. Like, I don't know why she has a hard time getting a job. Let's just get her with Will, our like, job coach, and, like, we'll just get her back out there, right? And then you do that, and when you don't look at long-term data, you might have called that a success. But when you really dig into the past and her history, you're like, there's so much more there. And so that woman ends up, like, so she had never really consistently connected with a counselor or therapist. She had done a lot of just medication management with a psychiatrist, but never really dug into and addressed, just kind of like symptom based, like I'm going to take meds when these symptoms arise, as opposed to like really digging into like, what are these patterns? We like talk about it, like uncovering patterns, shining a light on those things that you don't see. And unless someone knows you really well and knows what to look for, like they're not seeing those things either. And so it's never the same thing twice. And I think if we could just like get everyone job training in a job, like that would help a few people. That is maybe all that they need. But it's like the very, very few.
Lesley, when you met with us last time, you had an intriguing comment that we shouldn't be afraid to get into policy work.
Oh yeah.
What policies do you see that our society ought to take a
gosh.
look at changing?
So many. This is Lesley's opinion. I'm not speaking for
Yep,
North Valley
fair
Ministries.
enough.
So there's a lot. So I started in child welfare, so I really did a lot of like in-home work with families, and that's where I really started to kind of see a lot of broken systems, right? So if you even just take child welfare, right? Like the majority of children are removed from homes because of neglect, which is typically has to do with families who don't have resources, right? So you're looking at, it's a lot of the same families we work with. And that's actually one place that families have started coming from, is hearing about us from their child welfare social workers. So there's like a big disconnect there, but it's so one is families who, you kind of have different types of families. You have families who you look at like generational poverty, right? Like this is a system that they have grown up in and lived in, and this is normal. This is the norm. And so we're looking at it from this like, oh, this is wrong. This is bad. They need to be doing something different. That's not the way that they're looking at this. So like automatically, this is us looking through a lens and putting a judgment on their situation. The family is fine finding and utilizing resources to make it through life. That's what they saw. That's what they do. And so you kind of have to assess, like, does this person want more than this, or is this what they want? Right? Like that's a big piece of this. And if it's something that they're really trying to be that first person in their family to like get to a place where they're not relying on different types of assistance, or like in and out throughout different times of their life relying on assistance, and that's what they want, then you can look at things like we have a huge wait for childcare assistance, right? So like, say I'm a single mom and I'm like, I'm changing my life today. I got into school and I'm just gonna make something of myself, right? And you're like, well, I'm low income. I can go down and I can apply for childcare assistance and get some help while I'm in school. Surely there's a program that does that. We have an extensive wait list for that type of a service. And it's also like, a lot of these programs, like right when you start to make enough, it gets cut off. So it's like, it's a little bit too soon. So it's just sort of like that type of thing. I would say the same with, I think about like shelter right now, our emergency shelter system, right? I will go back to the eviction moratorium, right? Where people's rent was, people weren't being evicted. And there was also Wake Prevent that did a whole bunch of rental assistance for people. And it was supposed to be along with like a case management like component. But it just kind of wasn't. And so in October, the people who were receiving that Wake Prevent money, a lot of that started to get cut. And so people just suddenly, like, their rent was no longer being paid, and they're going to get a lot of notice that this was going to be happening or changing. And so lots of people were in this position of like, oh no, I have to now come up with this money. And so the flip side of things like not having childcare assistance for people who are really wanting to go to school, get a job, really get out there and make changes, you have this other side that's giving resources without any type of accountability to make a change while these things are being received. So like, to me, if that money had gone along with like really intensive like job coaching or training, right? Like the things that we were talking about, that would kind of make sense. Like, so when this funding ends, this person's going to be in a different place. No one was in a different place. Everyone's in the exact same place, right? No behavior change has occurred. No one has learned anything new. No one has envisioned a different life for themselves and started to take steps there. So I would say those types of policies are equally harmful, right? There is a middle, there's a middle, and I don't even know, where that exists, but it definitely has to do with support and accountability. Those are the two things. And so, I mean, you can look at it kind of like in any arena of what's going on right now, but like having those two things, and then having like measurable objectives, right? Like we do that in business. You can do that in social service type programming as well, right? Like we do it in transitions and journey. What are you trying to achieve with this funding and what's happening? So yeah, right now, the majority of money that's coming in federally is going toward rent and utilities and some deposits. That's like coming down and going to like the county. And I was in a meeting at Department of Social Services Friday with like one of the head people over housing for the county was there. And I asked about tracking like what is happening to the people who have received this funding. Like, are they remaining housed? Like, what's actually like just any kind of outcomes here? Because you're just talking about just so much money coming into our community, and they don't have an answer. Like, it's not something that's tracked. And so something that's like, if we're to help with this, can this person sustain afterward? And then are they still housed 6 months after we help them? Like, that's the kind of stuff that like you want to be able to ask and have people answer. And I think for me, it has to do with just being fiscally responsible. And I think the other thing is like, we know how programs work. We know what to do to get results. It's very relationship based. It's very person centered. There's no one size fits all approach, but any kind of program that does housing, but also has a case management component, and not just for them to say, we do case management. What do you do? Right? Like, I think they had to check in once a month and see how the family was doing, but I don't even know what that means. Right? It's like literally sitting with them every week. And it's like, you should be able to say like, the family's like, this is my goal. This is where I want to be. This is what I'm working on, like that level of engagement. And so, like I said, like support and accountability, like they have to go together.
Do you know of other places, other states, cities that might be a model for this?
I like, so in Boston, I can't think of the name of the agency, Empath. I'm trying to think right off the top of my head, but they do some similar work to what we do, but they also have a housing component that goes along with it. And I really liked it a lot. It's a short-term kind of housing program. And you kind of have, so it's very similar to what we do. It's just that people are actually housed there. So you're going to work with them. And then I recently saw though that they like extended it, and they were talking about like people remaining in the housing for like 3 years. And that to me is just too long. Like if you look at studies, there's just this point of like, you have to look at like, it's going like up. And then you get to this point where you start to have like, it's going back down. So that's the piece I don't think that people research and read enough about. And it depends what is the model in the program that you're doing. So, because I've seen models like Journey, like, right, like maybe a church is doing some kind of like outreach work, and they're staying engaged too long. And you start to see that people become dependent on you. You start to see this, like, this actually isn't going well anymore. And you also don't have the urgency of something that's structured where you're like, we have 6 weeks left. We have 3 weeks left. Like, what do you want to accomplish? We have to make the most of our time. You have this built-in urgency where people are like accomplishing stuff that they never would because you've limited time. And that kind of goes back to like, if you have, 3 weeks to write a paper for college, right? Or you have a day, like you can do it in a day, but you'll take the whole 3 weeks. It's exactly the same principle. And so I think that definitely like models like that where, and I talk about this all the time, but like I think about the extended stays where people were being housed and paid, like the rent was being paid there for them for all these years. And it's like, if we had just been able to adopt one, literally do our exact journey model, like hold the financial piece portion in the conference room of the extended stay, meet with people in their rooms, bring the groceries to them, do journey exactly like it is, but you are working with people who are basically like you could transition them. You would just have to have a partnership that's like, how much longer is this going to be paid for them? And it would have to step down. It's like, after this many months, it's this much is going to be your responsibility. And after this many months, this much. And so, and then understanding like mental health and substance use and really digging into that stuff and knowing like where are these issues that are really needing to be addressed. And so I just think it's interesting. So we do a lot of like throwing tons of money at a problem that nothing changes. And then we do a lot of like restricting programs that are really good that need to be more widely available. So, I mean, I think like if any young parent is doing amazing in school, like, yeah, like figure out how their kid can be safe while they do that. I can't see why that would be harmful to society in the slightest, right? Like it's the child's in an enriched learning environment. This person's going to raise their earning potential. They're going to be a better parent when they're done with it. It's like, and that's the kind of stuff that's just so restricted and hard to access. So it's just interesting. Our county, and I get it, COVID was not expected. They did the best they could, but it's you could kind of see where this was going to go like a mile away. And so we still have people living in those extended stays and it's still being paid for. So I talk to Donna all the time about it. I'm like, we're going to adopt one of them. She's like, you need the funding for that, Lesley. You can't just go do it. So yeah. So, but it would definitely be a really amazing pilot. You have a model that works with the population that you're already serving in the area you're serving. Like you really could go do that 12-week program with people who wanted to sign up and say, you would also have a control group of people who are in other extended stays and weren't offered it. And you could literally just look at what is the outcome. But I mean, I already know what it would be because we know, but yeah. So just that type of creative work, but I just say outcomes, like anything that you're supporting, what is the ultimate goal and how do they measure that they've gotten there? I think that that's something that just so many people have gotten away from. And we just talk about this good work that we're doing and these people that we're helping, but how are you helping them? Right. And so I think about in that old way, we would talk about, we help this many people with rent. And it was like, that's not an outcome, that's an output. That's you help them with rent, but you don't know what happened after that and how many people's lives were actually changed. So
great insights. Other questions from the group? Well,
Lesley, I just have a question about the way we used to do backpack buddies with the schools. Now, are people coming to us just strictly for that food that we are then getting them involved in the program? Like, do you find people just coming for that weekly backpack buddy?
Not too many people will come like weekly for that, but I think it's like a huge, especially for first time clients, like the clients that are coming in, they're like in immediate crisis, like that truly is like the amount of food that they need. But yeah, we've engaged a lot more families, and I can't attribute it to having the like kid friendly food, but I do know when we were doing it through the school, we never met a single family because it was literally just like you're dropping the bags off at the school, right? And so it just wasn't like very on point with the mission and engaging. So, but yeah, the majority of our families, it's like a split. We do tend to have a lot of adults who don't have children, because that's a population that doesn't qualify for assistance like elsewhere. Like kids really help you to be able to qualify for some things. But yeah, but like a huge percentage do have like the school age kids still. Well, if anyone does ever have questions, you can always just email me, or better yet, come out and visit us. Come on a Thursday.
And if you're interested in volunteering, you can talk to Karen Weber, our advocate, and also Rick Menzel and other people who are involved
And
there.
Amy.
So,
Yeah.
consider that. Fantastic information, Lesley.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Before we close tonight, let me tell you about some upcoming events. We're calling these Matthew 25 Mondays. They're always done on Monday, always by Zoom, and always at 7 o'clock. They're not necessarily done every Monday, so we'll do a program for a few weeks and then pause and then do another one. But next week, November 14th, we have Joe Burmester. He is the executive director of Loaves and Fishes, and he will join us to tell us how that program is making a profound difference in the lives of children in Southeast Raleigh. We'll take a break for Thanksgiving week, and then starting on Monday, November 28th, and running for 4 weeks, Pastor Tom Watkins will lead us in a class titled O Come Emmanuel, a Bible study on the intersection of Matthew 25 and Advent. That is.
I am.
I felt very successful in getting that information out of you. And I have no doubt that this will be an incredible class, but Tom is still working on what that will be. So join us for that. It'll go for 4 weeks. Take a break for Christmas and New Year's. Then on Monday, January 9th, Maggie Kane will join us to talk about her experience working with those suffering homelessness and how it inspired her to start A Place at a Table. So I've asked her to talk about more than just the program A Place at a Table, but the years she spent working hard to eventually come up with that program. Details of all these will be in the weekly e-newsletter, in the weekly worship bulletin, or you can contact me or the church office. With that, Pastor Tom, do you have a question?
Well, yeah, let me just say one thing about the class I'm doing. You're going to need to have a Bible. So I know you're I know you're Presbyterians, but if you don't have one, I'll get you one. But
Okay.
you're going to need to have at least some Bible. Old and New Testaments. Don't come with one of the little ones. Just bring a real Bible with you. Okay.
Make it
Be
so
all
you can,
right.
big enough to read.
Okay. All right. Let's we finish. I'll close this in a prayer. Okay.
Yes, if you would, please close us in prayer.
Gracious God, we are thankful for many things, including particularly tonight, the gift of North Raleigh Ministries for the work, the passion, their heart, and for handling such a great need, but also in such personal ways. For the energy of Lesley and many others like her, including some in our own congregation who have given themselves in the manner of Christ to people in need, people hurting and people in need of such good grace. We ask that you continue to work in our hearts and minds, that we might be advocates for such folks, that we work toward a place of a peaceful kingdom where those are fed and loved and cared for and nurtured and housed in your name and in your honor. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay,
Thank you, Lesley.
Thank
All right,
you.
thanks. See
That
you
was
later.
Thank you.
Thanks.